Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule in this fantastic weather to come and hear me talk about what I think is an interesting and new way of working and thinking about the way that design, user experience, IA usability can fit into software design. What we're going to talk about today, and if I get too close to the edge, please give me a heads up. The stage doesn't go all the way through if you can't see it. If I get too close to the ball, it's funny for you, painful for me. What we're going to talk about today is very briefly talk about how I think we got into a deliverables-based culture. And why the focus on deliverables specifically is not necessarily the right approach, and then how to get out of that focus on deliverables and work in a new way that focuses primarily on the actual experience that we're building, the actual design, the end goal of what we're actually building. And then I'll go through a quick case study about how we're making this work at the Ladders, which is where I work, and I'll show you how we put this into action there and how successful that's been, and then give you a quick heads up about how to get started within your own organization with this particular process. And hopefully that you'll be able to take that with you to your respective offices and teams and try it out and see if it actually works better for you. So very quickly, just a recap of who I am. I wear this shirt every day, so whenever the picture is taken, I'm always in this shirt. It's perfect. So it always matches up. I'm currently the director of UX at the Ladders here in New York. The Ladders is a online job service for 100K plus professionals, if you're not familiar with us. I've worked as a consultant. I've worked in software shops. I've worked at agencies, including Publicis Modem here in town. I've managed the UX teams at WebTrends and AOL. I keep a relatively active blog here at jeffgothelf.com blog. Gloria mentioned my Twitter account, so please follow. It's riveting. You get to hear about lean UX and my kids, which is fantastic. Email me if you have any questions. And as Gloria mentioned, if you are tweeting tonight, please use this tag so I can check out all the back channeling later on after the presentation. So without further ado, how did we get into this deliverables culture? So when user experience began, really one of the defining activities was information architecture, but folks did not really know what an information architect was. The practice was picking up steam, but it wasn't clear what the value was that the IA and the UX designer brought to the table. Whereas if you wrote code, you had code as a deliverable. If you were a graphic designer, you had mock-ups as a deliverable. If you were a business analyst, you had requirements documents as deliverables. But IAs, it was still unclear what we did. And so we started building deliverables. And this was a good thing. Deliverables helped define the practice of information architecture and user experience design and software design as a whole. Sitemaps, wireframes, content inventories, the spec itself. This is an actual spec that I wrote when I was at AOL. Every pixel in the right spot, every item marked and linked to where it's actually moving. And these specs actually did us a favor. They helped define what we did. They got us a seat at the table, and they made it very obvious what the value was that software design, UX design, IA, interaction design brought to the table. Unfortunately, what it also did is it put us into the deliverables business. The value that we brought over the years has gotten so focused on who can create the most beautiful deliverable, the most beautiful spec, and the focus starts to move away from the actual end experience being designed. So for example, you may have a beautiful wireframe, and I designed this wireframe so I know it's beautiful. You may have a beautiful wireframe, and it may be pixel perfect, and you have all the marks for screen resolution and all the callouts. But ultimately, if your experience looks like this, then the wireframe itself, no matter how beautiful, is worthless. And so, unfortunately, people are getting hired based on the quality of the deliverable itself, and not necessarily the end experience being built. What's important, ultimately, is whether or not you're solving your business goals and meeting your customers' needs. And so, if the deliverable gets you there, that's fantastic. But if it gets you here, that's not a good thing. Interactive experiences are evolving rapidly, mobile, location-based services, et cetera, and the documentation that we're creating is also ultimately insufficient at communicating all the different activities in the states and the different formats of these products. And so not only is the end experience sometimes being ignored as we're focusing on the deliverables themselves can't adequately communicate the experiences that we need to actually build in the end. And so with that, enter the lean UX process. And this is how I define it. I'll let you read it for a second. You can't see this, but the podium is angled, and I'm hoping my drink doesn't spill. So lean UX, inspired by the lean startup movement and agile development theories, it's the practice of bringing the true nature of our work, software design, UX design, IA, usability, to light faster with less emphasis on the deliverables and a greater focus on the actual experience being designed. And I underline true nature and actual experience because I think those are congruent terms up here. The true nature of our work is the actual experience we're designing. There's an end state, there's a product that somebody's using. Nobody uses the deliverables outside of your company. There's an end state here. And so very quickly, what I want to point out is I'm not going to stand up here and give you a lesson in Agile. That's not what this presentation is about, and not necessarily a lesson in Lean. I do want to define those terms very quickly in the next slide. But ultimately, this is about a different way of working and a different way of thinking about your design process. And whether you work in a waterfall shop or an Agile shop or anything in between, I think these processes can work for you. So very quickly, what's Agile? If you're not familiar with Agile, does anybody work? Who's heard of Agile development? Nice. It's very popular these days. Does anybody work in an Agile shop? Nice. Not bad. So you guys should be familiar with this. Ultimately, 10 years ago, for those of you not familiar, 10 years ago, some software developers got together in Salt Lake City and wrote a manifesto and signed it with the Declaration of Independence. And it boils down to basically these 4 points: valuing the things on the left more than the things on the right. So valuing individuals, interactions over processes and tools, so talking to people as opposed to talking to tools themselves. Working software over comprehensive documentation. This is sort of the core of the presentation tonight. So getting to working software faster as opposed to getting to comprehensive documentation faster. Collaborating with your customers over contract negotiation, and then responding to change over following the plan. This is, again, sort of lowercase agile, being nimble, being able to move with your market. The lean movement, how many people have heard of the lean movement? Slightly less. So lean, in a sense, is even maybe a more extreme version of agile. There's a gentleman on the West Coast named Eric Reese, who's the champion of lean startups. But the gist is that the lean startup methodology initially advocates the creation of rapid prototypes. And those prototypes test your assumptions. So you have an idea, you prototype the idea, you test it with your customer base, with your market, to get that customer feedback faster in a much more raw format, and then getting to that better product faster than you would using traditional software engineering practices. So these two theories serve as kind of the inspiration for the lean UX process. However, you do not need to be working in one of these environments for lean UX to work for you. And so without further ado, these are my hand-drawn sketches of what the lean UX process looks like. So if you work in Agile, this should look a little bit familiar to you. But here's how the concept breaks down. And this is the core lean UX process. And so you have an idea, or you have a project to work on, and rough out the initial concepts. And literally, the definition, the fidelity of the work that you're doing, shouldn't be, doesn't have to be any more of a higher fidelity than what you see up here in this sketch. Get a rough sketch down, get an idea down, get a whiteboard, make it a rough wireframe. It doesn't have to be pixel perfect, but get the idea down quickly and effortlessly. If you have the opportunity to prototype it, in other words, you can even put it in PowerPoint, you can put it in any tool that you work with, just to get an idea of what it's like to work through that flow in a very rough format, and then start validating the idea. Get the idea out Get out from behind your desk, validate the idea. Get it to your boss, get it to your teammates, get it to developers, get it to customers, if you can, to test it externally. Learn from that feedback, learn from that user behavior, and then iterate on that low-fidelity sketch or wireframe. And here's the kicker, okay? This is just your UX process. Now, you could take this approach and blow it out to the entire software development lifecycle or whatever your process is, but you can focus simply on the UX or the design process. So if you work in a waterfall shop where you've got very delineated phases, you've got your definition phase, your design phase, your development phase, your testing phase, your launch phase, you can apply this simply to the UX process, to the design process, and easily build in usability testing right into this process. Again, keep it lean, prototype it, and I'll go through all these steps as we go through the process itself. Validate it with your team, validate it with your stakeholders, with your clients, validate it with your customers. Again, show them whatever you have to show them, learn from that, iterate and refine before you get to that pixel perfect mock-up. Get an understanding of what the needs are. And here's the kicker. You have to get out from behind your monitor to make this work. Can you guys see that? The idea is, typically, in many ways, we'll get, as designers, we'll get handed work, we'll go back to our desk, we'll sit back there for 3 days, a week, a month, and then come back out and say, hey, I made you this beautiful, shiny object, what do you think? And the lean UX process says, do it quick, get the idea down, and then get out from behind your monitor and shop that idea around, post it somewhere publicly, show it to your people. This is an actual screen grab of the design board that my team has at the ladders. This is in our space. We have an open floor plan. And whenever we have ideas or sketches or wireframes or whatever we're working on that's in a rough format in an early stage, we'll throw it up on this board. And anybody can see it. Everybody can walk. Everybody can write on the board. They can offer opinions. There's an opportunity to get community feedback from not just your team, but from a broader subsection of the folks that work with you in your office. Get the work out there, show it to people, and get that feedback to ensure that you're heading in the right direction.